keep in touch with everyone who's interesting who you've ever met. In other words, relationships are key. And even in the age of the internet and social media, relationships are gold. Keep in touch with people. Add value to people. Your network is the gold mine for your relationships.
Welcome to Career Coaching Secrets, the podcast where we talk with successful career coaches on how they built their success and the hard lessons they learned along the way. My name is Davis Nguyen, and I'm the founder of Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to $100,000 years, $100,000 months, and even $100,000 weeks. Before Purple Circle, I've grown several 7- and 8-figure career coaching businesses myself, and have been a consultant at 2 career coaching businesses that are doing over $100 million each. Whether you're an established coach or building your practice for the first time, you'll discover the secrets to elevating your coaching business.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Career Coaching Secrets Podcast. I'm your host, Regin, and today's guest is Dr. John Izzo, a best-selling author, global keynote speaker, executive coach, and pioneer in the purpose-driven leadership movement. With over 3 decades of experience advising 500 plus organizations from Coca-Cola to Microsoft, John helps leaders embrace intentional change, drive engagement, and lead with purpose in today's evolving business landscape. He's the author of 9 acclaimed books, including The 5 Secrets You Must Discover Before You Die and The Purpose Revolution. And he's spoken to over 1 million people worldwide on how to align values, leadership, and impact. And it's a pleasure for me to have him on the podcast today. Welcome to the show, John.
Hey, thank you. It's great to be here with you and your community.
It's great to have you on, John. Thank you for coming. I really would like to know, when it comes to your beginnings and how you started your coaching business, first of all, what inspired you to become a coach, and then start this as a coaching business?
Well, I kind of have a more unusual background than a lot of people probably in this field, in that my first career was actually as a Presbyterian minister. I was a pastor in 3 churches, ending in San Diego, California in 1987. And I had gone back to get most of a PhD in organizational psychology because I always had a fascination with leadership and organizations. And to make a long story short, I got a fire in the belly for the impact that work had on people's lives, that we spent all this time at work and it either added value to our lives or detracted it. Either we found a career that gave us a lot of meaning and purpose, or we just were punching the clock. And I really also saw the impact that companies had on society. So that really began this journey. And I wound up doing a couple of stints inside big companies in organization development, then was a vice president at a boutique healthcare consulting company. And finally went out on my own and wrote my first book, Awakening Corporate Soul, 30 years ago. And the rest is history. So, and I really value that early time as a minister because I got to really be with people at really important times in their lives. And of course, because I had to write a new speech every Sunday, I also got really good at speaking.
Nice. So it's been many, many years since you started doing this. Throughout your coaching journey, when you go through a coaching journey with a client, which part of that coaching journey do you think you find the most rewarding since you started doing this?
Well, first of all, each coaching client is different. They're all on their own journey. They have their own goals, their own history, what they're trying to accomplish, what their dreams and hopes are for their life or their career or their business. So first, it's so important to begin the journey to get to know that person. And again, that's something I think I honed those skills early on in my career of just listening to people's story and helping them identify what they really want to be different in their lives, in their leadership. And that's always, to me, the beginning is really taking a deep dive to understand that person. And I think sometimes we get too quickly to what we want to do before we really understand this person's journey and what they're trying to accomplish. But the second thing is, I think the most rewarding part for me is giving people some practical things they can do after each coaching session, both in terms of behavior, but also mindset, way that they're thinking about the issue or problem or the opportunity they're working on. And the most rewarding thing is seeing people come back and say, I tried that and it worked. I was in that meeting and I was different. I reached out to that client and I had a different way that I was in that moment or in their personal lives. So to me, the most rewarding part is seeing people make those changes and achieve their goals. And, there's nothing more rewarding than seeing that.
Mm-hmm. And so when it comes to the clients that you work with, do you find that they fit a certain profile, a certain demographic, certain industry, or a certain goal that they're trying to achieve? How would you describe the ideal client profile that you typically engage with?
Yeah, there really are two probably profiles, I guess, for me. One is they're in the C-suite or CEOs or they may own a business and they're trying to be a more purpose-driven leader. They're trying to engage their people more deeply, develop deeper and more positive and constructive relationships. Often they're trying to get their organization to the next level, and they sense that there may be something about their leadership and the way they're leading that is either in the way or not accelerating the business the way that it can be. And so that's the first and prime profile for me, is a leader, a business owner, often at the very senior level, who is really trying to take their business, but also their leadership to the next level, both in terms of people leadership and also strategic leadership. The second profile is I've wound up in, especially in recent years, working with people who are at a point in their career where they're trying to figure out what's next for them and how they can get there. They're often mid-level leaders or professionals or entrepreneurs who feel maybe that they're stuck. They've reached a ceiling. And I think I'm particularly good at helping people think about what may be keeping them from going to the next level, but also clarifying what they want. I'm always surprised how many people come saying, well, what I want is I just want to make more money or to have a position with more people reporting to me. But often that's not enough. I really try to help them understand what are the elements you want in that next step. And there's 4 quadrants I often work with people around that, which we can talk about if we want. So that's the 2 profiles.
And so when it comes to them working with you, how would you describe the engagement of working with you? Is there a certain program of certain length for anyone who's listening, for any leader out there? How is it like to work with you?
Well, first, I always tell people, if you want a coach who will just tell you what to do and not ask you questions, just give you advice because this is what they did and now you should do it, I'm not your guy. On the other hand, if you want a coach who's just going to ask you questions and never share their experience or give you pretty direct advice, I'm not your guy. So the first thing is I try to balance those 2 things. And my clients seem to really appreciate that. First, I have, 40 years experience in the business and coaching and working with leaders and organizations. I'd be cheating my clients if I don't share that experience, what I've learned, and give them direct advice. On the other hand, I have to ask powerful questions because ultimately it's their journey. They have to come to the learning. So I try to balance those 2 things, and the clients seem to appreciate that. And I say often in the beginning of the relationships, my goal is to be balanced. If you want more advice, I'm not giving you enough advice, tell me. If you think I'm giving you too much advice, tell me, and we'll go more in the direction of asking more questions. So I try to balance those 2 things. And I think for me, 6 months is the sweet spot. I won't work with someone if they won't commit to 6 months because it takes about 30 to 60 days just to change one habit from unconscious incompetence to conscious competence. And so consequently, 6 months to me is the minimum, but I always start at 6 months. I don't want to lock someone in for a longer period of time, though most of my clients will go a year or a year and a half, but we always go in those 6-month increments. And typically I'll have 1 to 2 calls with them a month, but then I'm available to them by text or by email, in those moment to moment things. And then I give them some, we always leave with a clear action plan of things they're going to try and experiment between now and the next time. And I also ask them to prepare before they come to be able to tell me what happened in those experiments and what their assessment is so we can always hit the ground running right away. So that's my typical approach. And in the case of leaders, if they're really working on the people dimension of their leadership, I will often also do a 360 interviews with some of the people who work with them so we can get some very direct feedback. And then later we'll ask the people, did they make progress on the things that they identified? Because I'm big on, if you want to change as a leader, let people know what you're trying to change. If you're trying to be a better listener, Don't keep it a secret. Tell your team, I know they know it already. You're not a good listener. So tell them, because that creates the creative tension. They want to help you now because they know that you're working on this. And also it means they'll give you feedback and other things that will be valuable. So that's my basic approach to coaching.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. And as you mentioned, the 360 kind of like assessment and interview, one interesting thing that came up in the podcast is a coach was doing it a little bit differently. So she was working with executives, but instead of doing the 360, what she was doing is doing the same thing, but she would be on the call with, let's say, one of the employees that were doing the interview, and she would just be there and have the feedback given so that there's nothing lost in between. So if you go into, let's say, we ask person A what they think about X, then we go to person B and then we ask everyone, and then we might get opinions or we might not get what's actually going on. There might be something behind the lines there. So that was also another thing that one of the coaches that were doing was interesting, but still the 360 also works very well. So I just wanted to share that. But
yeah, let me just say a word about that, because I think it's an interesting approach. The one downside of that is that depending on the leader or the person, people may not be as forthright or as honest as they will be, but it's a great approach. One of the things I work with my clients, whether they're working on their career or working on their leadership, is to get them to ask for more feedback on a regular basis. So once we do that 360, I have them then asking for the feedback on how they're doing. Are you seeing progress? What's working? What isn't working? And, one of the things that's so important as just a life skill for us as coaches to work with people on is their capacity to hear feedback. I'll give your listeners a great gift. Here's how most of us receive feedback. We say thank you. Then our nonverbal says no thanks. And we know nonverbal is more powerful than verbal. Then we say that powerful 3-letter word, thank you, but, which means now we're going to either defend against the feedback or try to explain it away. Instead, every time we get a piece of feedback or ask for feedback and someone gives it to us, instead of saying thank you, but, we should first of all say thank you with genuine appreciation and then say, tell me more. Not to defense, but to curiosity. And one of the things I teach my clients is even if the feedback is only 10% correct, and most of the time it's way higher than that, you will learn more and develop a better relationship with people by being curious about the 10% that the feedback is right than trying to defend against the 90%. So we really have to help our clients get better at receiving feedback, because most of us are horrible at it, including me. I've gotten better at it over the years because I teach this, but that's our natural instinct, is to defend or explain. Instead, be curious. The magic trick is, thank you, tell me more. I want to know more specifics, examples, what might I do differently? And that's a heroic shift for a lot of people. And it's a really important part of coaching, is to help people get better at receiving feedback, not just asking for it, because if you can't receive it properly, it doesn't matter how much you ask for it, because people won't give it to you and you won't really hear it.
So what would you say is the goal? Is the goal to optimize for 100% of the feedback, or is that maybe kind of like over optimizing at some point?
Well, I think one of my mentors, Ken Blanchard, who wrote The 1 Minute Manager and about 500 other books, I'm exaggerating, but not by much. Ken, said years ago that feedback is the breakfast of champions. And the truth is, in almost every endeavor in life, I play sports, I play tennis, I have several coaches, but even when I play a competitive match, if I lose the match, I ask my opponent, what did you notice about my game today? By the way, I don't ask that when I win, because people don't like that. But, one of the things is we have to really get used to, in our personal relationships, in our lives, in meetings, after you give a talk, even if you lose a deal. If I have a client who turns me down for a keynote speech, for example, or an assignment as a coach, they choose someone else. First thing I say is, I know you made the right decision because you're the client. By the way, I'm not going to argue with you. Congratulations. I'm sure you made the right decision. But I would love some feedback from you. And I promise I will not defend in any way. And, I learned so much even when I lose. And so I think that, this concept, feedback in every area of our lives is the breakfast of champions. So I think the key is just, seeking it in the moment, in the whole, right? On a regular basis. And I think that's what we're trying to get people to do in their lives and in their careers. And it makes a huge difference when you start to see feedback that way and say, I want as much as I can get, as often as I can get it.
So right now, let's say with your coaching business, first of all, I want to ask one question before we get to that. So it's like a marketing question. What have you found helpful in terms of you getting more clients, generating more leads? What marketing channel do you find that works really good for you, for people to find you or you to find them?
Well, I'm fortunate because I've been in the business for a long time. I get a lot of referral business, right? But, I think that the more in almost every sales endeavor, the bigger the funnel, the more likely you are to get, sales. And the funnel has to be, of course, of qualified people who, really. So, we do a lot of videos on YouTube, a lot of videos that we put out, to our own community, because we have, thousands of people even in our own database who we keep in touch with on a regular basis. So I find videos is to me the medium of the day. And then and then being willing to take those calls, and I have my assistant has some qualifying questions to make sure that, we're not wasting their time and mine. And then really, so I find videos a very powerful tool. And then the second thing is try to be aware of what your close ratio is. Because obviously, if the person is qualified in the sense of they're working on things you can help them with, and they're willing to invest, your close ratio should be pretty high. So if your close ratio isn't high, then you start to ask, I wonder what I'm doing in that sales process. And here's where, again, it's helpful. If you lose it, say, hey, I'm sorry you didn't decide to do this. I'd love to know what got in the way or what made you make that decision. And I promise I'm not going to try and defend or convince you. And once in a while, of course, you wind up being able to convince the person because they can handle a real objection. But most of the time you learn how to do better.
Thank you. Thanks so much for sharing it. So for the next, looking into the future, for the next 1 to 3 years, is there a specific goal that you're trying to achieve with your coaching business?
Well, I'm really an impact focused person. And, I'm lucky. I'm at that stage of my life where, money is not the prime objective anymore. Of course, I like making money and, money is great. But the prime objective is really looking for people who I can impact, who will impact others, impact their industry, impact their community, impact their people in a more powerful way. So I'm always looking for people who are really leverageable, clients who can leverage a bigger impact because of the ecosystem that they're a part of. And so that's, one of my goals is fewer, better clients. And better, I don't mean better human beings. They're all great human beings. Better in terms of their opportunity to leverage a difference in their community, their business, or their sector, because I'm very impact focused at this stage of my life. That's what happens when you're in your 60s. You get to be a little more selective about what you wind up doing because you have less time left too.
Yeah. Cool. I really like that. So basically you want to try and have coaching clients. You want to have people that kind of like have the opportunity to make a big change or a big shift because they are in this position where they like a change that they can make and impact more people down the road. Is that what you mean? So basically you're changing the leader is impacting a lot more lives below that.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. I'm coaching a younger leader now in the healthcare field. Mm-hmm. And she has tremendous potential, I think, just as a leader. I think that eventually she's going to be in a senior role somewhere in an organization and going to be an amazing leader. So I'm working with her about how to focus where she wants to go next. In fact, I'm excited because she just took a new senior position that really came out of our coaching together. So, it's always a great moment when the client achieves that next step. But I know this person is going to have a big impact wherever they go. But I wanted to make sure I could help them go to the place that was going to be the best next step for them and to get clear on the impact they wanted to have. So that's what really gets me up in the morning and gets me excited. So that's just happened actually. Just found out that she got that new position a couple of days ago in our last call. So that's an example, where, or maybe it's someone in an industry that can have an impact on society or an impact on their industry in a profound way. And I get to help them leverage that. So I'm always looking for those kind of clients who just have potential, either because of where they're at or who they are.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. And thank you for explaining it also with your example. So right now, I also wanted to ask you, and this goes back to the research that I mentioned, when it comes to investments that you've done over the years, what have been some good investments that you're proud of? Maybe investments in yourself, investments in the coaching business. That could be coaching programs, masterminds, communities, things like that. And what have been, if any, investments that you would have preferred to have avoided?
Well, it's funny. Nothing comes to mind in terms of what I would avoid. And here's the reason, because everything is a powerful learning experience. Although one piece of advice I would give to people is, if you're making an investment and it's obvious that it's not paying off to you, fail fast. I've done some work with Google, and Google talks about the importance of failing fast, experiment and failing fast. And I'll give you an example. I recently, engaged someone to do some work with me, and I don't want to say what it is because I don't want to hint what it was. And it was obvious after the first, endeavor that it wasn't going to produce the results that I wanted. So I pulled the plug. I could have kept investing, but that would have been silly because it was obvious to me it wasn't going to produce what I wanted. But I guess the best investments I've made, probably two things. One is always find people who are more successful than you and learn from them. One of the pieces of advice I would give my younger self is, I think when I was younger, I was kind of a know-it-all. I thought, well, it was hard for me to really sit at the feet of people who were more successful than me. But, as I got older, I realized hang out with people who are more successful than you and be really curious about what they're doing. Learn from them. Confucius said the easiest path to wisdom is imitation. Learn from others who are so whatever you want to do, whether it's in your coaching practice, speaking practice, find people who are really successful at it and sit at their feet in a humble, curious way and learn from them. The second thing is always be investing in learning and growing with something at every point. In other words, always have some learning experience, some investment you're making in your growth, in your skill, and make sure you never have a gap. There's always something I'm going to invest in next. And I've done that right now. I've got 2 or 3 things that I'm investing in, even at 40 years in, that are growing and learning and really helping me. So keep investing. And if it's not working, pull the plug and find something else. Because, if it's not working after a short period of time, most of the time, your instinct, pull the plug, find something else, make a small investment first. But don't make some big, don't give somebody $25,000 because you think they're going to teach you something. Give them $1,000. And then if you don't learn anything in the first 1,000, you're probably not going to learn anything in the 25,000. So that's one of the things that I've learned kind of the hard way.
Interesting. So when you think about the people that are, let's say, more successful, people that you looked up to, how would you approach to them to actually learn from them? Because this is it could be something like, obviously your time is not as valuable as theirs. From their perspective, they wouldn't want to waste their time with you. So is there a strategy you approach these people?
Yeah, 3 things come to mind. My wife always says I say 3 things before I know if there's 3 things. And this might be one of those moments, but I think there are 3 things. The first thing is, don't ask for too much. Start with just one. Don't contact a person who's really successful and say, would you be my mentor? Would you be my sponsor? No, say, I'd love to just have a small amount of your time to ask you for some advice because I know you've been really, so first of all, ask for something small. If they want to give you something more, if they say, well, I love John, I love this person, I want to be your mentor, I want to go deeper, they'll do that. The second thing is add value, twice as much value as you take from every relationship. So and this doesn't just go for people more successful than you, always have the mentality. If I'm going to have a professional relationship with you, for example, I want to add at least twice as much value as you're giving me. So that means I might recommend to you, here's a couple of the people you might want to have on your podcast, 2 times, what you gave me, etc. And then the third thing is, remember, it's a numbers game. I might ask 10 people who are really successful to give me a little bit of their time to help mentor me or give me some advice. Maybe 8 out of 10 will say no. Don't take it personally. Don't feel rejected. That's the ratio you should expect. But the 2 who say yes will be magic. And maybe one of them will wind up, giving you some advice or things over time. So those are the 3 things. Don't ask for too much. Don't take rejection personally. And just understand that just a little tidbit can make a big difference. You're not looking necessarily for someone to create a revolution for you. It might just be one good idea that they give you. And then make sure to really express appreciation. Here's the last thing. Let them know you did what they said and it helped. As someone who wants, again, I'm like you said, I can't give time to everyone who asks for my time, but I do. Sometimes just that person, I say, well, I want to help that person, or I'll give them a bit of my time. Nothing more rewarding than getting an email or a text from them saying, by the way, I did it and it had this impact. That makes me want to do more of it and feel better about that. So many times we take and never give that person, because why is someone going to help you who gives you the time of their day for nothing? Because they want to see they made a difference. If they don't see they made a difference, they say, well, why did I bother having that call with you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like if you didn't take action, they might have given you very good advice. Didn't take action. It was their time was wasted on you. And really good advice, by the way, what you just gave is that create the right amount of expectation when you're reaching out. Is not going to be like 100% people are going to say yes. It could be like 2 out of 10 times that maybe they could say yes, even sometimes even less, who knows, but the people who are going to say yes. People are going to say yes, are going to make a real difference. And it could just be one nugget. It doesn't have to be them explaining everything to you, because you have to figure out like the 99%. But if they give you that 1%, it could make the actual difference, because oftentimes they know the things that you don't even think about. So it's like the unknown unknowns. Maybe just like a coach, right? A coach could unlock things that you haven't thought about, because with just a question, they can make you think about something you haven't thought about before. And then you get those aha moments that, like you just mentioned before, those are real impactful.
And everything you said is so true. And so it's just that one penny that drops in a coaching call, and often at the end of a coaching relationship, people say, it's just these 2 things. This is really what I got out of the coaching. If I only had those 2 things, it would have been worth it. The other thing you said is so important. I've discovered you never underestimate who you can get to give you the time of day if you're willing to ask. And as one of my mentors said early in my career, he wasn't new to him, but it's so important to remember, if you don't ask, the answer is always no. Don't be afraid of no, and don't take it personally. When I say no to someone who asks me to help them out, it's usually just because I'm too busy, my schedule's, or it's just not the right fit. Don't take it personally. Just move on to the next person. And again, you never know who you can get to give you the time of day if you're willing to deal with rejection and not take no personally.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks so much for sharing that advice. And also, I wanted to ask you just a little bit deeper to dig into what we talked about at the beginning, where you're like, pull the plug, fail fast. Is there some question you can ask yourself to realize when that is the right moment? Or is
I don't have any magic. I don't have a magic answer to that, but what I would say is most of the time follow your gut. Like the one I said I pulled the plug on recently, like my gut just, not only the gut, the metrics showed it too, right? But my gut just said, I don't think this is worth the investment that I would have to make to do that. So follow your gut. And if you're in doubt, ask someone you trust. I have a couple of people I think it's always important as an entrepreneur, as a coach, as a business person, to have a couple of people who have really good instincts. I have a friend, Matthew. I'll give a little advertisement for my friend, Matthew, who works with entrepreneurs and in startups. He has great instincts, right? And so if I'm in doubt, I go to him and say, let me tell you what's going on. I invested in this, or I do this. I'm thinking of doing this. What do you think? And he just has a really good mind and instinct around that. So know the few people in your life who have really good instincts. And if you have any doubt, check with them. And most of the time, those people with good instincts will kind of see through the noise and say, no, like it happened recently when he said, no, if I were you, I would not do that. I was considering being a board chair of an organization I'm on the board of. He cut through all the noise about the impact for me, for my work, etc. And immediately the answer was clear. And it was really fuzzy until I asked him for advice. As soon as he gave it to me, the answer was clear. And I said no.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, thanks so much for all of this. And right now, what would you say? You're driven by impact. So what would you say is a challenge for you right now that you're trying to solve for next? Where do you see the bottleneck in you further growing that scale?
Yeah, that's easy. That's easy in my case. Because of my age and stage of life, I really grew my career pre social media.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I'm proud of that. In those days, it was mostly referral, and speakers bureaus, and you would just build these relationships with people. And so I was lucky enough to have a lot of success without having to really, use social media at high levels. I think one of the challenges for me now is in this new world that has emerged is I'm working really hard now to understand how to leverage social media for impact. To use that to get my message out there in more powerful ways, to connect with more people in a compelling way. So that's a learning curve for me because I didn't have to do it to get successful, but I feel now to have the impact that I want to have and to grow the success even more in terms of how I define success, that I need to leverage that. So I'm, got some advisors now and people helping me with that. So that's easy for me. That's the frontier for me, is to really harness the power of the social media and the tools of social media to really grow my influence.
Cool. Thank you for sharing that. And so the final question I feel like is also going to be similar to this one is what advice you've already shared a lot of advice, by the way, and thank you for that. But what advice would you give to other coaches who are also looking to scale their impact?
Well, a couple of things. If I go back to my younger self, I would say, keep in touch with everyone who's interesting who you've ever met. In other words, relationships are key. And even in the age of the internet and social media, relationships are gold. Keep in touch with people. Add value to people. Your network is the gold mine for your relationships. The second thing is do capture your own audience. We have, I think, about 10,000 people who are in our community that we keep in touch with on, get a note from me every week and keep in touch with us. That having your own audience that you keep in touch with. And when people unsubscribe, I don't worry about that because the people who are unsubscribing aren't really engaging with my content, right? So we slowly grow that list, but the open rates and the click rates are really high. So create your own audience that you can communicate with. And of course, now you can use social media platforms, whether it's TikTok or Instagram and others, to do that as well. And then the final thing is have a clear niche as a coach. I always say to people, it's easier to be a generalist once you've been a specialist than it is to be the other way around. Mm-hmm. So don't be a generalist. There are thousands of coaches out there, coaching people on everything under the sun. What are you most equipped to help people do better? And I'm really clear on that. I'm most clear on helping people leaders grow their influence over their people, grow their ability to strategically lead their company, or to take their career to the next level if they're kind of stuck and don't know what's next and need to clarify that and figure out how to get there. That's my niche. I'm not going to coach you on how to grow your social media platform or, how to, live a more balanced life, though that might come into my coaching, right? So be a specialist, not a generalist. Once you're really successful, you can coach people whenever the heck you want to because people will come to you just because they're in love with you, right? But in the beginning, have a niche, especially in an age where there are so many coaches and so many things that are being offered to people. And think about on your own experience on Instagram or TikTok. You get the things that are sticky or something that really speak to the need you're feeling. So make sure you know who your avatar is, who is your ideal client? What do they look like? What do they sound like? What do they need? What do they want? What are they challenged with? Then go after that person in your videos, in your reaching out, right? So people know how to find you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, John. Thank you for all this advice. Thank you for coming to our podcast. For anyone who wants to find you or connect with you, they can go into LinkedIn, John Izzo. They will be able to find you there. Is there also a website where
Yeah,
people can
website, drjohnizzo.com, just drjohnizzo.com, no periods there, drjohnizzo. I'm lucky I have a not that unusual and an unusual name, so just Google John Izzo, and I'm sure I'm the first person that's going to come up.
Yeah, that was the case for me. So thank you so much, John, and thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you for a great conversation, and I wish all of your community much success, however you define success. And remember, life is short. Make it count.
Thank you.
That's it for this episode of Career Coaching Secrets. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this episode to catch future episodes. This podcast was brought to you by Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to $100,000 years, $100,000 months, or even $100,000 weeks, all without burning out and making sure that you're making the impact and having the life that you want. To learn more about our community and how we can help you, visit joinpurplecircle.com.